I would say, right, like it's always important for the person with ADHD to be making an effort. It can be challenging to do that. And so it's important to think about, what do I need in order to fully participate in this to the best of my ability, knowing my partner's abilities might be stronger and they might be more proficient in certain areas. What do I have to add? How can I stay involved with that? What does my partner need in terms of my involvement? It certainly doesn't feel good for one person to be the manager of everything and the other person just get to go along for the ride.
That is Dr. Michelle Frank. And this week, as we return for our 23rd season, we kick off a series on ADHD and family relationships with an exploration of that first relationship, our partners, spouses, or significant others. How do you create balance in the relationship and leave room for ADHD? That's up next on Taking Control, the ADHD podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast on True Story FM. I'm Pete Wright, and that's Nikki Kinzer.
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
It's season 23.
Woo-hoo! Very exciting. We're back from our little July break.
Do you remember how to do this?
No, because we both forgot to record on the very first show back that we just recorded. We forgot to record, but we caught it before we actually did the show. So kudos to us.
Dodged a bullet.
Yes.
Right there. That was scary, but it's okay. We've got lots of great things that we're going to be talking about. And today, in particular, our dear friend, Dr. Michelle Frank, is back to join us, and we're going to talk to her in just a bit. But first, head over to Take Control ADHD to get to know us a little bit better. You can listen to the show right there on the website or subscribe to our mailing list. We'll send you an email each time a new episode is released. Connect with us on Twitter or Facebook at Take Control ADHD. And if the show has ever touched you, if your life has been made better in some small way as a result of this show,
break out in song.
We invite you.
Okay.
I might. Hey, I'm watching Schmigadoon right now, and I want to sing everything.
It. Go, Pete.
And I want you to know about Patreon. What? So anyhow, patreon.com/the-adhd podcast. That is our community of fantastic supporters. For a few bucks a month, you get access to all kinds of fun stuff. You get early access to the show every week. You get to watch the live streams as we record these things, which is always nonsense. And you are going to get access to the new Patreon-only podcast from Pete. Pete is apparently going to do a podcast.
Pete is doing a podcast.
Very exciting. Yeah.
And it's not all about Pete, but it could be some things about Pete.
It's mostly going to be things Pete needs to know. Pete
That's
needs
right.
to learn lessons that Pete needs.
You have to tell the title because, it's everything that Pete needs to know. So it's a lot of Pete.
There was something about it. It's a lot. It might be a lot of Pete, but it's also a lot of you. So for your gracious support, dear listeners, this is a show for and dedicated to our members and things that we need to learn together. And so I'm very excited to get started on that. We've set this goal, and we're trying to hit this goal, and that will be a goal that allows us to afford to do it. Honestly, that's why we ask for this, so we can continue growing what we do here, and we deeply appreciate how you give so generously back to the show. So visit patreon.com/the-adhd podcast to join today.
That's right.
Dr. Michelle Frank is a clinical psychologist specializing in providing diagnostic and treatment services to individuals with ADHD. She is back with us today to talk about relationships and ADHD, specifically through the lens of the Gottman Method. And Nikki and I talked to her. We actually talked to her a month ago, and we're now giving it to you now. We're really excited about it because she was so gracious to record when her schedule allowed, and that happened to be some weeks back. But we're excited to bring it to you right now.
But this is also a kickoff of our series. For the next, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, I think at least 6 weeks, we are doing shows all around the ADHD family. So whether you have ADHD and your kids don't, or kids have ADHD and you don't, or the whole family has ADHD, whatever it is, we're going to be talking about some different things. So it starts off with Dr. Michelle Frank with talking about couples therapy. And we're going to talk about family tips, things that are actually tips from our listeners. You guys brought in some great ideas and brought to us some great ideas and suggestions. We're going to talk to an ADHD mom. We're going to do an interview with her. We have a couple other interviews on mindfulness and teenagers. Impact parents are going to be coming back. So we are going to have another conversation. I'm sure it's going to be fabulous.
Can't think of a better way to kick off than this conversation with our friend, Dr. Michelle. Dr. Michelle Frank is back with us after, so long. You know, the last time she was here, I think we were in the height of the pandemic being, everything being reopened, but only a little bit. And then everything was about to be closed again. And I think the three of us were all very depressed. The last time we talked, Michelle, it's so great to have you back with us. Michelle is a clinical psychologist specializing in providing diagnostic and treatment services to individuals with ADHD. And she's also a very handy expert in our address book on relationships. We're going to talk all about ADHD and relationships through the lens of the Gottman Method. So glad to have you here, Michelle.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be back.
We're all feeling better. We're all feeling better.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Well,
So
you
good.
are the very first show of our Families with ADHD series, and we are very excited to have you here. And I wanted to start with your interview because, you know, families are created by relationships, by parents.
We'd like to know how that works.
Yeah. So
Let's
please.
start at the very beginning.
So I am excited to have you here because, you know, all different kinds of families listen to our show, and it's important that we understand that if you have a partner, if you're in a couple relationship, because I know that the Gottman Method is not for individuals. I want to be clear about that. It's for couples. But what a great place to start. And so Pete and I's connection with the Gottman Method is way back when in the early, Pete, 2000s?
Surely. Like it was,
I think it was
late,
2000.
Late 99, early 2000. Yeah.
Yeah. We had a group that were of young couples, either married or going to be married. And we went through this book. And I still remember things from it because when I was reviewing my notes for today, I was like, yeah, I remember that. I remember that. All very sound advice because guess what? Pete and I are both married. To the same person.
Still.
Yeah.
Yes,
still.
to the same person.
Yeah. So something's working. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what this is? What is the Gottman Method?
So the Gottman Method is a form of couples therapy that is based in the research of John and Julie Gottman, as well as several others, folks like Bob Levinson. For instance, John Gottman started researching couples, what makes them work and what doesn't, back in early to mid 70s. So we're going on over 40 years of research on what makes couples successful. You know, at first they started looking at why do couples divorce? And from there, they moved on to, okay, so why are the successful couples doing so well? What sets them apart? What are they doing differently? And then when John linked up with Julie Gottman, his now wife, she's an expert therapist, also a very analytical mind, really wise, brilliant woman who specializes in a lot of trauma therapy, had a lot of good therapeutic training. And she came on board and said, you know, we can use this. We can create therapeutic tools. And so together they did that, started the Gottman Institute, and they started researching, you know, their theories. If we do an intervention in this way, does it help, you know, couples get to where they're going? So they use the predictors of divorce and separation, relationship demise, to help couples course correct and find what works.
How is this different from other approaches that you might find in couples counseling?
Well, I mean, a big difference is the wealth of empirical validation behind it. It's also incredibly integrated, meaning there are elements of, attachment theory, cognitive behavioral therapy. There's skill building, conflict resolution. There's a lot of moving pieces, but it's also incredibly well integrated so that it's very, very practical. A lot of both couples and individuals come to me, especially with ADHD, right? They've been in therapy before and they're like, I have all the awareness, but now what? Like, now what? Now where do I go? And the Gottmans have some really helpful protocols and exercises to help people build the skills when they're building upon the awareness that they've gained.
We as I said, we went through it a long time ago. This was actually before I had gotten my ADHD diagnosis, and so it was pre-awakening. I like to call it. But that's really what I'm into today, right? Is how does the method, the Gottman approach, interact with folks with ADHD? They're mixed ADHD couples like mine, or two ADHD individuals in a relationship together. How do you approach it through this lens?
So I think it's important to keep in mind, right, that couples therapy is not a treatment for ADHD. That's individual work. What couples therapy does is it looks at the impact of ADHD on the relationship. It looks at both persons' experience of ADHD within the relationship. So ADHD it's a player at the table, right? It's in the room, but ADHD isn't the only problem, right? And the couple is the client. A lot of times, the person with ADHD ends up being the identified client, and it's really easy on both sides of the equation to blame ADHD, when usually there's a lot of other things going on as well. There's a lot of meaning we make. A lot of emotional overwhelm, a lot of shame spirals, like all these other things are happening sort of as part and parcel of the ADHD, but also separate from it. And we can create these relational cycles and these negative patterns of interacting that over time compound and really erode the underlying friendship, closeness, and connection we have. So it's similar to how Sari and I talk a lot about, it's about ADHD, but it's about a lot more, right? Like there is a deep well to dive there. So Gottman therapy, like most couples therapy, unless some people do very specific ADHD, cognitive behavioral oriented couples work. But for the most part, in the couples therapy world, you'd be really hard pressed to find people who specialize. Like the average person is going to have a hard time finding a couples provider who also happens to specialize in ADHD.
Right.
The important piece of it is going in and saying, we really want to talk about the impact of living with ADHD and how that informs, derails our connection, how it informs or derails our communication, and how we can be a team about that. A lot of couples end up being very you against me instead of us against the problem.
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking, right? Is because, we may not think of sort of the Gottman approach to, couples therapy as ADHD therapy. But when ADHD is at the core of the relationship issues, the communication issues, like you're lighting a fire in the relationship. And it's all because of just sort of the way your brain's working.
And your dynamics around that and what it triggers for you and your enduring vulnerabilities that
and your awareness of it, like me, right? Like that's why we ended up going into couples therapies, because I didn't know I had ADHD.
It's interesting what you said, Michelle, about individual therapy. I want you to expand that a little bit more, because you were saying if you are looking, and I think you said maybe to manage or help you with your ADHD, that would be individual. The couples therapy is the impact that ADHD has on the relationship. I think that a lot of people that I work with, I think they go to couples therapy thinking it's going to be a way to manage ADHD.
Right. And then things get really sidetracked, right? Because then couples therapy is dyadic. It's about two people, not just one person and their chronic condition. Similar to if that person had MS or an anxiety disorder, right? Like there are other things that need to happen in conjunction. So a proper evaluation, perhaps medication, coaching, individual therapy, support groups, education, all of these things, right? When we're talking about successfully manage ADHD, we all know it's not a one-shot solution. It's really
really a lot.
Right. There are a lot of
complex
moving pieces that change over time.
Right.
And so couples therapy is one tool in that toolbox. But what we're looking at is, how do I experience ADHD? How does my partner experience ADHD?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we do that together?
Mm-hmm.
Where are we not doing that well? Because ultimately the problem solving, the strategizing pieces, like having a weekly family meeting to go over the schedule and the finance, that's 5% of the solution, of the problem and the solution, right? It's you don't need to be in couples therapy to necessarily come to that conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
But what's getting in the way of us getting there, of having that conversation in the first place, following through on that? How do we
not
feel
fighting
we don't follow
when
through?
you're
Right.
in it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
How do we do that effectively? How do we work through everything that comes with it?
Okay, so I did some digging and I went into his website and looked at his blog and all of these different things. And oh my gosh, it's a wealth of information. One of the things that he talks about, and you even have this on your page on your website too, that explains how to get a hold of you. It's the sound relationship house theory. So this is to help us understand how the good relationships are working. Right? Is that correct? Or what is this? How do you explain it?
Sound relationship house is really the crux of the entire Gottman paradigm. It's a metaphor we use when we're looking at relationships to say what's working, what are the strengths and challenges, and where and how do we intervene. And so we think of relationship like a house, and the two load-bearing walls are trust and commitment, right? The first floor is friendship and feeling respected by your partner, the presence of fondness and admiration. We move up to the second floor. We have some really important relational qualities like turning towards one another for connection instead of away, accepting bids for connections instead of tuning them out, and also our mindset. What sort of perspective do we have about our partner? Do we give them the benefit of the doubt, or do we replay everything that's ever gone wrong and really build that negative, what we call negative sentiment override? The next floor up is conflict management. How do we talk about our feelings? How do we regulate our feelings both together and separately? So you can see where ADHD is just playing all in here, right?
I was just going to say about the first two, even like as soon as you talk about like my sort of ADHD bent on perseveration,
Right.
like I can hyper focus on all the little things if I don't like really concentrate on breaking those patterns.
Right.
It's so easy to get into those loops where and then we have conflict.
Yes.
And I can't even help it.
Yes. And vice versa, right? Like, God, the house is a mess and now I have to take care of it. And so they always do that. So you're just spinning the negativity wheel, and then the friendship really erodes. And then the top floors are how we create meaning together, shared values, but also it's like the balance of we and me, right? Like you don't always have to have the exact same life dreams and goals, but how do you make room for that together in your lives? So some people come in and they just need a total demo run out, right? It's just
tear it down and build it back up. Yeah.
Especially if trust and commitment aren't there. Right?
Oh,
then
like if one person was not loyal. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Then other people, for instance, like they haven't ever really had a chance or the time or opportunity to really identify what the shared we in it all is. And then other times it's things like, there's a big fire on the conflict management floor. And so now there's flood damage down in the friendship, right? Because it also, it impacts each other. And so when we're starting therapy using the Gottman method, we assess like, where's the relationship, based on these different characteristics of what we know is essential to making a committed relationship work over time. And where can we, just similar to ADHD coaching, where can we use the strengths to support the challenges, and where do we need to intervene? And frankly, where don't we? And so the relationship house is used really throughout couples therapy as sort of a landmark to always go back to and say, where are we at with this? And to use as a metaphor for trying to explain what we're talking about.
If you are going into couples therapy and we're looking at this house and there's some of these things we're doing pretty good, like trust and commitment. I'm in it and you can trust me. But what you're saying is some of these things could need help. So when you're going into couples therapy, you're figuring out or trying to figure out where you want to build and make that stronger.
Yeah.
Okay. So like turn towards instead of away. I can see like you get into a fight, people shut down. So that's turning away. So then that might be something that you would talk about in therapy am I getting that right?
Yeah, absolutely. There are also smaller ways of turning away. When a couple is in conflict, successful couples in conflict have a ratio of 5-to-1 positive to negative interactions. When they're doing well, it's 20-to-1. So it's, what are we putting in the positivity bank? And turning towards can be really simple. It can be, oh, honey, come look at this stupid commercial. This guy's ridiculous. Or, oh, look, it looks like it's going to rain. Those things seem pretty innocuous, but they're actually some form of a bid for connection, right? Share this tiny bit of my day with me, laugh with me, see me, hear me, be close to me. And over time, we can, like, those things are easy to attend to in the beginning, right? But like over time, we can start to let them go. But certainly that is another place perhaps where ADHD comes in, where perhaps an inattentive trait or something like that, or perhaps erosion of, an underlying feeling of connection with your partner over time can lead you to start shutting down some of those bids. And so the Gottmans have a saying, small things often. It's not always like the big, huge moments. It's also what makes up our daily lives together, and how do we choose each other in that.
This erosion concept really strikes a chord with me, because that leads to something in a feeling I think that's really important. And Nikki had pointed out a blog post called the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. And I feel like I can really relate to that criticism, contempt pair, right? Like when you talk about like when a relationship is struggling and you go down to the 5-to-1 versus 20-to-1 positive to negative experiences, you kind of get the sense of like, when I am feeling compromised in some way in the relationship, it's so easy to turn that outward.
Absolutely. And the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse are the 4 behaviors that were found to be most predictive of relationship demise over time. Successful couples, they might creep in here and there, but for the most part, they use other ways of communicating and connecting. In ADHD, I see a lot of cycles of criticism and defensiveness, counterattack, blaming one another, leading into contempt, leading to defensiveness, leading to shutdown. So oftentimes we're working on having the conversations we want to have and doing those interactions differently. But it can be hard too when we're emotionally flooded, which is also something that easily happens with ADHD. So to give you an example of like what those 4 things mean, imagine you're going about your day, la-di-da, and your partner says, hey, got a Home Depot return. Can you take care of that today? You said, sure. I wanted to go pick up something anyways. And you go to Home Depot, you pick up your thing on the way home, you realize, shoot, I forgot the return. Okay. So how do you and your partner deal with this? On the surface, it's a pretty simple, small ADHD sort of moment, right? Forgot the return. This happens a lot. Okay. But a critical response or criticism would be you returning, your partner saying, gosh, you always forget. You always forget everything. I feel like you just don't care. So it's attacking the character. It's a lot of you always, you never. Whereas contempt has a mean streak to it. Often there's a sneer, and it's a sense of looking down on someone. So contempt would be, yeah, of course you did. You always do. I'm married to a teenager, right? So they get really contemptuous. Mean jokes.
We hear that all the time in people in ADHD relationships because, yeah, totally.
Right. That dynamic comes up, but it's not a healthy way to say it, right?
No.
And then in turn, you get some defensiveness. So that can be counterattack. Well, you said you would leave it on the table and you didn't, you're not perfect either. And then there's like a victimhood thing, right? So, I can never do anything right by you. Nothing I do is ever good enough. And now we've got a nice little cycle going. You can see where then now we're just going to, one up that with more criticism, more defensiveness. Someone's going to shut down. So now we get the emotional flooding come in, and we can really, like I said, start a fire on the conflict management floor if we're not careful. Luckily, there are things we can do to shift away from those patterns very effectively. It takes practice, but it's very, very doable over time. And a lot of my work with couples with ADHD is helping them express their feelings, their needs around these moments in ways that are more productive.
Can you give us an example of what that might look like?
Yeah. So with criticism, the antidote to criticism is a softened startup. So that looks like saying, I feel X about Y, I need Z. So how I feel let down that you forgot to make the return. Just last night we were talking about how crazy busy things have been for me lately and how I can't handle one more thing. And so when you came home and said you forgot, I just felt crushed and like it's all on me. And I really could use some reassurance that you have a plan and a time of taking care of that. The antidote to contempt is both using softened startup when you're actually communicating, but it also involves some background work that takes some time, which is working on that negative sentiment override, building up a list of things you appreciate about your partner, giving them the benefit of the doubt, not dwelling on the constant negative appraisals of your partner. Right? When we're flooded, that's easy to do, but it's just not helpful. So taking some time and doing some self-soothing and then reminding yourself of the good qualities of your partner. So thinking to yourself, that annoyed me. And, we had a great morning. They didn't do this on purpose. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. Like, these moments are hard and this is a perpetual problem we're working on, but I'm sure there's a solution.
I just want to reflect a little bit because that, to me, it's just a reminder that is as much in an effort to stave off future conflict as it is for me to put the brakes on my own emotional on-ramp.
100%.
Right?
100%. Yes.
Because if I get good at saying, X, Y, and Z. I love the way you put that. I feel like this. Here's what I need ultimately. Then it's almost a practice of slowing down.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And now we're in it together, right? We volley that back and forth. So the defensiveness, right? Instead of you can notice, you can even say to your partner, all right, I'm starting to take this personally. I'm feeling a little defensive.
Yeah.
I feel really badly that I forgot this because that's something we've been working on. I've been working on, and it's hard for me to hear that I let you down. And what I need is, for you in this moment to give me the benefit of the doubt and know that I have a reminder set and I'm going to take care of it tomorrow. I don't have the energy tonight. And so I could, also use, a little break tonight, and I'm going to do it tomorrow on the way to work. So again, you're going back in that softened startup, but you're taking a little bit of responsibility too.
Right.
Right. You're owning something. And again, like you don't have to own it all. You don't have to be completely on the same page for it to be workable. Validating, reflecting your partner's point of view, slowing down, and using the softened startup. None of that is saying, you know what, I completely agree with you 100%. It's simply saying, I hear what you're saying. Given what you're saying, given your perspective, I see how you got there. I didn't return the item. I didn't follow through on what I said. And here we are.
Can you reflect a little bit on the other side of that though? Because you just hit me, which is, you're taking a little bit of the responsibility, right? You're sharing the responsibility, you're owning what's yours. And yet, what I find and what I feel like I hear is when you're living with ADHD and something happens that a ball drops for a reason that you attribute to your ADHD, it is very easy and very quick to say, it's all my fault and I'm a terrible person. And my experience is that's also diminishes the relationship and your ability to move through conflict.
100%, right? Because then you shut down or you flood. Sometimes then the partner will feel, okay, great. So now we're in your shame spiral. And so we're, again, not dealing with the problem and I don't feel heard. But what needs to happen in those moments is a break. That's another huge piece of this, especially with the ADHD propensity to emotionally flood. Right. And a break is longer than 20 minutes, no longer than 24 hours. It's truly separating yourself and not sitting in the other room and fighting with your partner in your head, but taking a walk, reading a magazine, doing a deep breathing. But an important part of taking a break is saying, I'll be back. So that your partner knows we are going to get there. Right now, I'm feeling shame spiral coming on. I'm starting to feel defensive and I can't hear you the way I want to hear you. And I can't express myself the way I want to express myself. And so I need to take a break so that my frontal lobe can come back online and then we can have the conversation we really want to have.
I don't want to make this about me.
Exactly.
And we're at a risk of doing that. Give me a timeout. Right.
Right. I need to do some self-soothing here.
Going back to one partner has ADHD and the other partner doesn't. And the partner that has it doesn't feel like the other one really gets it or really does feel like they're blaming them, like, oh, here you, it's that contempt, right? They go straight to contempt. So I when I'm hearing you talk about that story and different options of how to kind of deal with that, one scenario that kind of comes into my mind that feels like it would work is here you've got somebody that doesn't have ADHD and you explain it to them like what might have happened or why this could have happened. So you're having an understanding of how the ADHD worked in that situation, having some kind of acceptance that that's what it was, and then moving on to, I appreciate, thank you for listening. I'm going to do this tomorrow. I've got my reminder. It just feels like I feel like, is there some kind of acceptance around the ADHD that needs to happen from both partners?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's hard. That doesn't happen overnight. When it comes to understanding ADHD, I see a lot of people give books or articles or, there's a charismatic social media figure. They send a TikTok here, like this objective person can tell you because I don't know that I can find the words, or we get caught in our dynamic and I don't feel understood. And some people do learn best that way through reading, for instance, or their coping mechanism involves heavy research. But for a lot of couples, it goes a lot farther if you both sit down and have a conversation using sentences that start with, help me understand. Help me understand what happens for you in these moments. And I'm going to put aside my judgment. I'm going to take notes, right? That can be helpful. Then if you have an impulsive thought, you can jot it down. You can write down their keywords so you don't forget or interrupt each other. You reflect back what they're saying, and then they do the same for you. And that's how we ultimately work on understanding. Gottman uses the research of Anatole Rappaport, who is an international conflict resolution researcher. And they thought, hey, we'll take this. This applies to marriage, right? So they did. And what they found is that any attempt at active problem solving was totally ineffective and inefficient unless you first had understanding. So the goal in these conversations is always to be able to understand and repeat back your partner's perspective, right? In a way that is satisfying to them. Like, yes, you got it. That's how I feel.
You hear me. You understand me.
And the other partner to do that back before you move into problem solving. And oftentimes, especially with ADHD, it's like, well, I'm going to use my reminder. I can't remember things. That isn't necessarily enough to get to the heart of understanding each other's lived experiences in that moment and how it comes out, because you also don't know what enduring vulnerabilities are coming forward in that moment. A lot of times it comes down to things like, I feel like you don't have my back. I feel alone. I feel like I'm a caretaker, just like when I was 13 and my sibling was terminally ill, or what, it can get really heavy in ways that we don't always see coming. We can't take understanding too lightly. And it isn't just cognitive. It has to be emotional.
Yeah, I just I think back to, how many times you have the conversation. I couldn't pick up that thing from Home Depot. I have ADHD. I can't do those things, right? Or blaming the ADHD, or on the other side of it, you have ADHD. You can't do those things. Either way, you're not talking about sort of the real issue. You're talking about kind of a symptom,
right? Because, and notice, both the two horsemen of the apocalypse came up there.
Yeah,
I can't. I have ADHD, defensiveness.
Yep.
You always say that you can't get anything right. Criticism, right?
Yeah.
So we're not actually in the zone of truly being able to relate to each other on this.
It's interesting to me, the connection between understanding before you're trying to manage the conflict. That really connects, because it does make you think, okay, take a step back and really feel what the other person is feeling, or hearing what they're feeling. That's really interesting. I also remember before I got married, somebody told me, and I don't remember, but it really goes into what he's teaching. They said, you can tell how successful a couple is going to be on the way they fight.
Yeah.
And I have got to admit that that's pretty true, because when you look at like sheer fondness and admiration, I don't know if any of you have like been in like a situation where you're at a dinner or you're at a party, and this couple, you're talking to some couples, and they're just like so rude about each other.
Yeah.
And, and it's so uncomfortable, because it's so awkward, because they're either going to get in a fight or they're in a fight, but they're like mean to each other in front of people. So then I always think of like, what are they like at home? But my question here, contempt to me is really mean. Yeah. And I remember telling my daughter when she started like being interested in boys and, these relationship hurdles, I told her, I said, your dad and I have never called him a name, and he has never called me a name. Yeah. Now, we have fought and we've argued, but we've never like, you so-and-so. But if you're getting that from somebody, how do you resolve that? Is it possible to save your marriage?
So
yeah, it's like when you're at the party with you and your partner, and all four horsemen have all come with you, right?
Yeah,
and all like, 6 of you are there.
When do you walk away, or is it? I don't know.
That's a good time to get therapy.
Yeah, right.
It's a good time. It probably could have happened sooner.
Sure.
Couples, usually start therapy 6-7 years too late. And I would add, it's not just how couples fight. That's an excellent point. it's how they repair, because there are
Mhm.
different types
Mhm.
of couples that do conflict in different ways. Some are more conflict avoidant, some are more conflict pursuant. Um, but it's not just like how you fight, but it's how you repair
Yeah.
too, and do you accept your partner's attempts at repair, or do you shut them
Oh, good
down? That's
point.
a big thing,
Right.
right? Like, so I'm really sorry, I want to do this differently, I want to work on this, and then you're met with, yeah, right. I mean,
Yeah.
Sure.
that hurts. Um, as opposed to, I want to get there, I'm still feeling all the feelings and I need some time, right? So like
Mhm.
there's different ways to communicate it. Again, with contempt really, and it is the biggest predictor of divorce because it really erodes everything, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so it takes time, and it's about rebuilding a sense of fondness for your partner. It's about communicating with respect and intention. Um, and it involves a lot of emotional regulation pieces. It involves having you not saying the first thing that comes to mind, but trying to slow down and communicate in this new way, and then
Hmm.
really trying to rebuild the positive moments of connection, right? Building up that piggy bank in your emotional deposits is really truly essential, because once the
Mm.
friendship is gone, right, you can
There's
do it,
not.
but it's just a lot of work.
Yeah, you gotta like
You can
to hang out with the
rediscover, but
person.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you
That's so
like your
interesting.
partner? Do you like
Mhm.
that? That matters.
Yeah.
I know, I've had too many conversations with people who don't reflect on the fact that their partner is they're also a friend,
Right.
right? Like they've moved into this romantic relationship and they still spend more time cultivating their best friendships with people outside their relationship than actually looking at the person they've married.
Right. Right.
And that's a good reminder.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
Like you married them for a reason, and that
Yeah.
reason was not because they are exactly the same as you.
Right.
Right.
And so when you have these moments of inevitable difference, it can be helpful to remember you married them because you embrace the ways you're different. Sometimes that is
Mhm.
hard.
Mhm.
And also because they're much cooler than me and I tricked them.
There you go.
So
There you go.
it's just bamboozled
There
them
you
the
go.
whole time. Yeah.
So I have a question, Michelle. This actually got brought up in our Discord, and a couple of different listeners were feeling it. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are around like planning vacations and planning dates, and so one person. How do you balance that? I guess is probably the best way to say it, because somebody with ADHD, they're saying it's hard. It's hard to plan ahead. It's hard to do all of the details. But the person that doesn't have ADHD may feel like it's always being brought on them and they always have to come up with the ideas. How do you figure that out so there's either a compromise or something that works for both people?
And the answer is probably going to be different for every couple and every
Sure.
family. I think you have to identify, what is negotiable and what isn't. Where are my
Hmm.
boundaries around this? Ultimately, like, are me and the kids going on this cruise no matter what, or like, you know, um, what does that look like? But I would say, right, like, it's always important for the person with ADHD to be making an effort. It can be challenging to do that. And so it's important to think about, what do I need in order to fully participate in this to the best of my ability, knowing my partner's abilities might be stronger and they might be more proficient in certain areas. What do I have to add? How can I stay involved with that? What does my partner need in terms of my involvement? Uh, and so again, we're having a conversation about, our needs and what we can contribute. But it certainly doesn't feel good for one person, unless it's already negotiated to be the role. It certainly doesn't feel good for one person to be the manager of everything and the other person just got to go along for the ride, right?
Right.
That's a recipe for resentment. And so it might be, well, I know honey, I'm not that good at this, but let's sit down. I want to be there when we book the tickets. I want some input. Let's talk about it.
Hmm.
Here's what it would look like to have a really good time. What are both of our dreams and expectations around this trip? or around how we manage the kids' summer schedule. For both of us, what does it look like to do that really well? Are we even on the same page about what a fun vacation looks like or managing the kids' summer looks like? So there's a lot at play there.
You know, what I'm hearing you say, which I think is really interesting, is I think there are a lot of areas where, I might say, you know what, I hate grocery shopping. I hate it so much. And there's a lot I'm willing to give up in terms of choice so that you'll just take care of it for me and not just tell me what you need from me. You want me to pick a meal for the week? I'll do it. Then you go do the grocery shopping. And in exchange for that, there's this thing that you hate doing, which is the laundry. And so there's balance.
There you go.
But this one, like vacation planning, seems different to me. And I really like the way you put it, because even if I hate vacation planning, generally giving up the choice on the conversation might be more damaging to my relationship with my friend, and my partner than stepping in and trying at least to exercise that creativity muscle to think about the things that I do care about within the vacation. I might not care about times, travels, trips, booking, cruise versus train. I don't care about any of that. But what you just said were some things that, frankly, I do care about. I didn't even know I cared about them, but they might actually, build a nice, solid foundation for a great trip. And I still don't have to do the parts that I hate, that she might love.
Right.
Right.
And can I sit with the discomfort of the things that are hard for me, knowing that I'm doing it because it matters to my partner? It brings us closer when I do sit down at these meetings and we do these things together.
Yeah. Goes back to the positivity bank,
there
right?
You go. There you go. And frankly, why are you going on the vacation if there's absolutely nothing that excites you about it? Most people with ADHD have a million things that you get excited about if they really put some thought into it. And so maybe it starts with having a conversation about that. What excites us about this idea?
The risk is that the time I get excited about a trip is when I'm on the trip.
Yeah.
Like I can't think that far in advance, Michelle.
I know, it's so stressful.
And once I get there, I care about a lot.
Yeah.
So I have a question from one of the things that you said earlier. And it was sort of in a joke, well, not joking, but in passing about, well, they probably should have been here 6 years earlier, or 6 to 7 years earlier in therapy. I've heard that before, where a lot of times again, probably from the same person who told me about the argument thing, but that a lot of times one partner, once you're in therapy, one partner most likely has already checked out. And I don't know if that's true. I don't know what that's all about. But when you said, I think maybe they do come too late, there's got to be something to this. So how can you prevent not going too late?
In not all cases is that one of the partners checked out. It's just that these patterns have been going on for
so long,
for a while. First, highly recommend premarital counseling or counseling as newlyweds, ounce of prevention and all of that. Also noticing, do I see some of these Four Horsemen come up? Do I feel understood by my partner? Do I really understand their inner world? Do I feel connected? Is our friendship strong? Are we really hurting each other when we fight? These are questions to ask, to say, could we use a bit of a checkup? How do we deal with stress together? A lot of times I see couples who are smooth sailing when things are going well and there aren't many external stressors, but you add on the loss of a job, COVID, any number of things, and suddenly, boom, things really go boom, right? And so how do we deal with stress together? It's never a bad thing to go and just have a few sessions, see how things are rolling. And if you're like, I think we're pretty good, then you leave feeling pretty good. And if you leave with some homework and some things to work on, that's great. So there's never a bad time to enter into couples therapy. There's just times where there's more work involved or less.
Yeah, right. That's interesting.
But it depends too on people's goals. I mean, people navigate relationships in very unique ways, and it's not always the status quo, and so it's also
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
about what do we want our relationship to look like, what's most important within this relationship,
Mm-hmm.
and people have different answers to that. Like things that
Mm-hmm.
I think would make me unhappy in a relationship or a marriage, aren't my cup of tea, would be great for the next person. So
Right.
that's
But
always really
having that
interesting.
conversation, like you said, the pre-marriage or premarital counseling, having those conversations at the very get-go are so important because especially if you're younger, you're just thinking of the wedding and
Oh,
all of the
everything's great.
fun,
Yeah.
but it's not the
Mhm.
marriage, it's not the actual connection there. Yeah, this is so fascinating. I
Yeah.
love
Yeah,
talking
this
about
is
this.
great.
It's
Yeah.
really
I
interesting.
know. So useful. And I think it's stuff we just, we don't talk about it enough with each other in a relationship, right? You get into the groove, and before long it's a rut.
Right. Daniel Wild, another famous couples therapist, said, an author said, every marriage is a mistake. But pick your
Ow!
pick your poison. He's basically saying there's always going to be something that is difficult, and Gottman's
Mhm.
research shores that up. 69% of conflicts in an ongoing relationship are ongoing problems.
Yeah.
They're perpetual problems. They're things that
Mhm.
it's the same fight over and over, right? So you sort of pick your poison when you choose a
Yeah.
partner, and no
Yeah.
Well, and
one's
this
going to
is
be fully conflict free and your best friend and your everything in the world without some
Right.
work.
Right.
well, we had Seth Nelson's divorce attorney on the show to talk about ADHD and divorce, and I guess we probably should have had you on first. But this is one of the things that came out of it was like, divorces, by the time they get to him, the attorney, they've been on the path for divorce for at least 4 years, right? Like that's it. So in hindsight, when you're sitting down with your attorney and you reflect a little bit on how did we get here, you got here over 4 years of work toward this path, unintentional though it may be. It's because you didn't take those steps 4 years ago to ensure you didn't get here. It'd be a great back-to-back episode. We should have done that.
Right?
I have another clarification that I want to before we wrap up. So you had mentioned that it's hard to find a therapist who does couples and who will understand ADHD or, maybe understand it, but specialize, in ADHD. So for our listeners out there who know that that's going to be difficult, but they do find a therapist that does marriage counseling or find someone who does the Gottman method. Can you just remind us or review, like, how do you present that to the therapist?
Yeah. I mean, I would start by saying that ADHD is a really important part of our story. And it's an important, really central piece to a lot of our communication and conflict problems. And so it's really important that it's present here in this space. We want that to be something that we focus on. And do you feel like that's something you can offer? If this person's like ADHD, I don't know if that's even a thing. Well, then to get on out of there.
Right.
But a lot of them can help you have these conversations about, part of it too is what is your brand of ADHD and how do you explain that to your partner, right? It's not so cookie cutter. And so they can help you have those conversations and help you come up with solutions that work for both of you. You can always ask if you can spend some time talking with them in an individual session. Oftentimes, couple therapists will then offer like an individual to both partners to just get some perspective. You can talk more about the impact of ADHD on you and your life and your relationship, and have your partner maybe do the same. You can ask if they'd be open if there's a quick blog post or something or a meme or something that really spoke to you and is like this is what we go through, bring it, share it. So they don't have to specialize. I think there are more and more therapists who do get it, who are understanding it better than ever before. But you're not always going to find the unicorn that specializes in the 2 or 3 or 4 things you want.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, a lot of times ADHD is part of the picture, but people have complex lives. You know, they have a kid with special needs. They have
financial problems,
problems, and an ill mother-in-law. I mean, list goes on. And so it's not so much about them, having a bookshelf full of books on ADHD as it is the willingness to have those conversations and support you in them.
You know, something you said, our story, that really hits me, because I think that so many times people are going in with my story, his story, her story. But when you said our story, I mean, it just gave me chills, because that's what you want it to be. You know, you want to be a partnership going in and getting help so that your partnership just gets better. Right. And I just wanted to say, I noticed that our story. Yep. I love that.
Yeah.
This is great. Oh, Michelle, thank you so much. I hope people get something out of this. We appreciate your time and having you back to share your wisdom and having a better year of it.
Yeah. Here's to a better year than 2020. Low bar.
Yeah.
We've
done it. That's right.
We got some good things going for us. That's for sure.
Yeah.
we got to do the plug part. It's been so long since we've heard from you. What are you up to?
Our book just came out on Audible, which is awesome. So it's a radical
Did you read it?
No, unfortunately not. But someone who reads books out loud for a living did, and so I trust them with it. And so it's a radical guide for women with ADHD, embrace neurodiversity, live boldly, and break through barriers, and that is now on Audible. So that's exciting.
Well, I will say this then. If you go to audibletrial.com/the-adhd-podcast and sign up for an account there, you can get that book for free.
Awesome.
And you can keep it forever as long as you stick around for a month. You get the book.
Awesome.
There you go.
That's great. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Such a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, it's always.
Absolutely. And thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to this show. Thank you for your time and your attention. Don't forget, if you have something to contribute to this conversation, we'll be heading over to the Show Talk channel in our Discord server. You can join us right there by becoming a supporting member at the deluxe level. On behalf of Nikki Kinzer, I'm Pete Wright, and we'll see you right back here next week on Taking Control, the ADHD podcast, season 23. Crazy. Thanks, everybody.